The first time Ethan Carter lit a candle in his new home, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't just the soft glow that filled the room or the faint scent of vanilla wafting through the air. It was the quiet reminder that even after everything he'd lost, there was still light in the world. Fire had taken his family, but fire also kept him grounded. Each flicker of the flame was a tribute to their memory, a way to keep them close. For Ethan, candles weren't just objects, they were lifelines. Fragile, yes, but powerful enough to hold back the darkness threatening to consume him. Unfortunately, not everyone saw it that way. Enter Karen Miller, a woman who prided herself on being the moral compass of her suburban neighborhood. With her clipboard perpetually in hand and her designer sunglasses perched atop her perfectly coiffed hair, Karen ruled her block with an iron fist. She didn't just enforce AOA rules, she invented them when it suited her agenda. To Karen, conformity equaled safety, and anyone who deviated from her vision of perfection was a threat. Her neighbors either feared her or revered her. There was no middle ground. When Ethan moved into the house next door, a quiet man with sad eyes and a penchant for candles, Karen immediately pegged him as trouble. Trouble came in many forms, she reasoned, and sometimes it wore flannel shirts and carried scented wax. Their first encounter happened on a crisp autumn afternoon. Ethan was unpacking boxes in his living room when he heard a sharp knock at the door. Opening it revealed Karen, standing like a general surveying enemy territory. Her clipboard gleamed menacingly under the sun, and her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as if announcing her arrival. "Mr. Carter," she began without preamble, "I'm Karen Miller, your neighbor. Welcome to the community." Ethan offered a polite smile. "Thanks. Nice to meet you." Karen ignored the pleasantries. Instead, she thrust the clipboard toward him, pointing at a blank line at the bottom of a document. "We have certain guidelines here: noise restrictions, pet policies, landscaping protocols." She paused dramatically before landing on the kicker. "And absolutely no open flames indoors, including candles." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Candles? Why would that be an issue? Her lips pursed into a thin line. "Fire hazards," she declared, as if stating the obvious. "This area is prone to wildfires. We can't afford carelessness." Ethan hesitated, his grip tightening on the doorknob. He wanted to explain, to tell her about the fire that had claimed his wife and daughter, about how those tiny flames were all he had left of them, but the words lodged in his throat. How could he make someone like Karen understand? "They're important to me," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "They help me cope." Karen's expression hardened. "Important?" she echoed, disdain dripping from every syllable. "You're telling me you need candles to live? What are you, some kind of romantic poet?" Humiliation burned in Ethan's chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Arguing wouldn't help. People like Karen thrived on conflict, feeding off the chaos they created. So instead of fighting back, he simply nodded. "Fine, I'll comply with everything else." But Karen wasn't satisfied. Over the next few weeks, she made it her mission to make Ethan's life miserable. Every time he lit a candle, she appeared, knocking on his door, peering through his windows, snapping photos of the soft glow spilling onto his curtains. She reported him to the Homeowners Association, which conveniently didn't exist, circulated petitions among neighbors, and posted incessantly on social media about the reckless stranger threatening their safety. Her viral post went up late one evening, accompanied by a grainy photo of Ethan's living room window illuminated by candlelight. The caption read, "When neighbors put us all at risk. New resident ignoring fire safety rules. Hashtag community matters. Hashtag stay safe." Within hours, the comments poured in. Some defended Ethan, questioning whether candles were truly dangerous. Others sided with Karen, calling him irresponsible and selfish. One particularly vicious commenter wrote, "If your family died in a fire, maybe you'd think twice about lighting another match." Ethan saw the comment the next morning, his coffee cup trembling in his hand. He stared at the screen, nausea rising in his throat. How dare they? How dare she? This wasn't about candles, it was about control, about power. And Karen Miller wielded both like weapons. As the days passed, the harassment escalated. Someone spray-painted FIREBUG on Ethan's garage door. Anonymous notes appeared in his mailbox, warning him to leave town. Even casual encounters at the grocery store turned hostile, with strangers glaring at him as if he were a ticking time bomb. Through it all, Ethan stayed silent. He refused to engage, knowing it would only fuel the firestorm Karen had ignited. But inside, rage simmered alongside grief. For years, he tried to rebuild his life piece by shattered piece. Now, thanks to Karen's crusade, those pieces were crumbling once again. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan sat alone in his dimly lit kitchen, staring at a single candle burning steadily on the table. Its flame danced gently, casting shadows on the walls. He thought about the fire that had stolen his family, the roar of the blaze, the acrid smoke choking his lungs, the unbearable heat searing his skin. And yet, here was this tiny flame, fragile and beautiful, offering solace instead of destruction. For the first time in weeks, Ethan allowed himself to cry. Silent tears streamed down his cheeks as he whispered to the empty room, "I didn't ask for this." Unbeknownst to him, across the street, Karen watched from her bedroom window. She sipped wine smugly, scrolling through updates on her phone. Her campaign against Ethan was working perfectly. The neighborhood was united behind her, and soon he'd either cave or leave altogether. What neither of them realized was that the real danger wasn't Ethan's candles. It was the spark Karen had lit in someone else's heart, a spark that would grow into something far more destructive than either of them could imagine. Karen had always been a master manipulator. Her ability to sway opinions and rally support bordered on genius or tyranny, depending on your perspective. She thrived on drama, turning minor infractions into full-blown scandals. To her, Ethan's arrival was the perfect opportunity to flex her influence. He was an outsider, a loner, and therefore easy prey. But Karen's obsession with control masked deeper insecurities. Beneath her polished exterior lay a woman desperate to prove her worth. Her marriage was strained, her teenage son barely spoke to her, and her friendships were superficial at best. Controlling others gave her a sense of purpose, a way to feel relevant in a world that often ignored her. Ironically, Karen's vendetta against Ethan stemmed less from genuine concern for fire safety and more from jealousy. She envied his quiet strength, his ability to find peace amidst chaos. Unlike her, Ethan didn't need validation from others. His resilience unsettled her because it highlighted her own fragility. Meanwhile, Ethan struggled to maintain his composure. Each day brought new challenges: hostile stares at the grocery store, slashed tires on his car, and even a brick thrown through his living room window with a note scrawled in jagged letters, "Leave or burn." Yet despite the escalating threats, Ethan refused to give in. He clung to his routines, finding solace in the rituals that kept him tethered to reality. One evening, as he stood in his driveway watching the sunset, a neighbor approached cautiously. It was Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who lived 2 houses down. She carried a plate of cookies wrapped in foil, her hands trembling slightly. "I know things have been tough lately," she said softly, avoiding eye contact. "These are for you. Just take care of yourself, okay?" Ethan accepted the gift with gratitude, touched by her kindness. It was a small gesture, but it reminded him that not everyone had turned against him. There were still good people in the world, people who understood pain and loss. As the days stretched into weeks, Karen's campaign reached new heights. She organized a neighborhood meeting to discuss fire safety concerns. Using Ethan as the central topic of discussion, flyers were distributed, emails sent, and social media posts amplified. The message was clear: Ethan was a menace who needed to be dealt with. At the meeting, Karen took center stage, delivering a passionate speech about the importance of community vigilance. She tearfully recounted tales of past wildfires, painting a grim picture of what could happen if residents didn't remain vigilant. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with quivering lip and tear-streaked cheeks. Neighbors rallied around her, vowing to protect their community from the dangerous outsider. Ethan didn't attend the meeting. He knew better than to walk into a lion's den unarmed. Instead, he stayed home, lighting a candle and letting its flame anchor him amid the chaos. As he sat quietly in his living room, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Fire, the very thing that had taken everything from him, was now being used as a weapon against him. What neither Karen nor Ethan realized was that the tension they created was spreading beyond their immediate circle. Whispers of discontent rippled through the neighborhood, dividing loyalties and stirring resentment. Some neighbors sympathized with Ethan, seeing Karen's actions as over-the-top and vindictive. Others blindly followed her lead, too afraid to question her authority. In the shadows, someone else watched and waited. This person saw the cracks forming in Karen's carefully constructed facade and decided to exploit them. They began leaving ominous notes near her property, setting up cameras to capture footage of her movements, and planting subtle clues designed to unnerve her. By the time Karen noticed the changes, it was too late. The spark she'd ignited had grown into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined, and when the flames finally erupted, no one would emerge unscathed. To say Karen enjoyed her newfound power would be an understatement. She thrived on it. Every retweet, every supportive comment, every nod of approval from her neighbors fueled her ego like gasoline on a blaze. She became obsessed with documenting Ethan's supposed infractions, setting up cameras outside her house to capture footage of his candlelit windows. Her social media presence grew exponentially, earning her local news coverage and even a feature on a daytime talk show where she preached about community vigilance. But beneath her polished exterior, cracks were beginning to form. The more attention Karen received, the more paranoid she became. At first, the strange occurrences around her home seemed trivial: a flickering porch light, a faint smell of smoke drifting through her kitchen. But as these incidents grew more frequent, unease crept into her mind. Late one night, she awoke to the sound of footsteps crunching gravel near her backyard. Peering out the window, she saw nothing but shadows dancing in the moonlight. Still, the feeling lingered, a cold knot of dread settling deep in her stomach. Karen's obsession with Ethan reached fever pitch. She began spending hours poring over grainy security footage, searching for any evidence that could prove he was behind the strange happenings. Each frame felt like a puzzle piece waiting to reveal the bigger picture, but no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find anything concrete. Instead, all she saw were fleeting glimpses of movement, shadows slipping between trees, figures vanishing into darkness. It frustrated her to no end. How could someone evade her so completely? Her frustration boiled over during a neighborhood meeting. Standing at the front of the room, she slammed her clipboard onto the table, startling the attendees into silence. "This isn't just about candles anymore," she declared, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Ethan Carter is dangerous. He's stalking me, harassing me, and putting all of us at risk." The crowd murmured in agreement, though some exchanged uneasy glances. Karen had always been intense, but this level of hysteria was new, even for her. One brave neighbor raised their hand hesitantly. "Do you have proof?" they asked cautiously. "I mean, we trust you, Karen, but proof?" she snapped, cutting them off mid-sentence. "What more do you need? My house smells like smoke every night. Someone's been leaving threatening notes on my doorstep. And don't even get me started on those cameras I installed. They caught him sneaking around my property." The room fell silent. No one dared challenge her further. After all, Karen had always been the one to enforce rules, to protect the community. If she said Ethan was a threat, then surely it must be true. Meanwhile, Ethan noticed suspicious activity too. On several occasions, he spotted a figure lurking near Karen's property, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette slipping between trees and shrubs. Whoever it was seemed intent on staying hidden, avoiding direct confrontation. Ethan debated calling the police but decided against it. If they found out he'd been watching Karen's house, it would only reinforce her accusations that he was unstable. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. Who was this person? And why did it feel like the entire situation was spiraling toward disaster? Ethan tried to focus on his routines, finding strength in the rituals that kept him tethered to reality. Each night, he lit a candle and sat quietly in his living room, letting the flame anchor him amid the chaos. But even that small comfort couldn't shield him from the weight of the neighborhood's hostility. His tires were slashed, his mailbox smashed, and his front yard littered with garbage. One particularly cruel act involved a dead bird nailed to his door with a note reading, "Leave or burn." Despite the mounting pressure, Ethan refused to give in. He doubled down on his routines, determined not to let Karen win. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, he couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was brewing just beneath the surface. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his dimly lit kitchen, there was a knock at the door. Startled, he set his coffee mug aside and approached cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw Mrs. Peterson standing nervously on his porch, clutching another plate of cookies wrapped in foil. "I know things are getting worse," she whispered as soon as he opened the door. "But please don't do anything rash. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't." Ethan frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Peterson hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone might overhear. "People are saying things, Ethan. Terrible things. They think you're behind what's happening to Karen. If you fight back now, it'll only make things worse." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not doing anything, Mrs. Peterson. I swear. I just want to be left alone." She nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Be careful, Ethan. Some fires can't be put out once they start." Her words lingered long after she left, echoing in his mind like a warning. What did she mean? Was someone else targeting Karen? Or was this just another attempt to make him look guilty? As Karen's paranoia intensified, so did the strange occurrences around her home. The flickering lights became more frequent, sometimes accompanied by the faint hum of electricity shorting out. The smell of smoke grew stronger, lingering in corners of her house despite repeated cleaning. And then came the notes. Cryptic messages slipped under her door or tucked into her mailbox. Each one bore the same chilling phrase: "Be careful what you ignite." At first, Karen dismissed them as pranks, or worse, attempts to intimidate her into backing off. But as the incidents grew more frequent, fear began to creep in. One night, unable to sleep, She grabbed a flashlight and ventured into her backyard, determined to catch whoever was responsible. The beam of light swept across the grass, illuminating nothing but empty space. Just as she turned to go back inside, she heard it. A soft rustling sound coming from the bushes. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaking. "Show yourself." Silence. Then a low chuckle echoed through the darkness, sending chills down her spine. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight, and bolted for the house. Once inside, she locked the door and double-checked the windows, her heart pounding wildly. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that she'd gone too far, that her vendetta against Ethan had awakened something far more dangerous than she'd anticipated. The next morning, Karen called an emergency meeting with her closest allies. Gathered around her dining table, the group listened intently as she recounted the events of the previous night. "Someone's messing with me," she said, her voice trembling. "They've been leaving notes, tampering with my lights, making it smell like smoke. It's psychological warfare." One neighbor suggested contacting the police, but Karen shook her head vehemently. "No cops, not yet. If word gets out that I'm scared, Ethan will win. We need to handle this ourselves." Another neighbor leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Are you sure it's not him? Maybe he hired someone to scare you." Karen hesitated, uncertainty flashing across her face. Could Ethan really be behind this? He seemed too passive, too withdrawn. And yet, who else would have a motive? Unbeknownst to both Karen and Ethan, a third party was indeed pulling the strings. Hidden in the shadows, Tyler Miller, Karen's estranged teenage son, watched everything unfold with a mixture of anger and satisfaction. Tyler had always resented his mother's controlling behavior, her constant need to micromanage every aspect of his life. When he learned about her campaign against Ethan, something inside him snapped. He decided to teach her a lesson, one she'd never forget. Using supplies stolen from the garage, Tyler rigged simple devices to create disturbances around the house. Tripwires connected to cans of smoke pellets, timers linked to electrical circuits, fake notes designed to unnerve her. None of it was meant to cause real harm, at least not initially. But as Karen's fear grew, so did Tyler's recklessness. What started as harmless pranks began to escalate, pushing the boundaries of danger. Back at Ethan's house, the tension reached a breaking point. One afternoon, as he returned from running errands, he found a group of neighbors gathered outside his driveway. Their expressions ranged from accusatory to outright hostile. "You're scaring our families," Ethan, one man said, stepping forward. "We've had enough." Ethan held up his hands in surrender. "I haven't done anything wrong. You're blaming me for things I didn't do." "We know what we see," another neighbor chimed in. "You're behind this madness. Leave before it goes too far." For the first time, Ethan felt genuine fear, not for himself, but for what might happen if the situation continued to spiral out of control. He retreated inside, locking the door behind him, and sat in the dark, staring at the flickering flame of a single candle. Outside, the storm clouds gathered, heavy with rain, and something far more ominous. It happened on a stormy night, the kind of night where lightning split the sky and thunder rattled windows. The air was thick with electricity, both literal and metaphorical, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this moment to unleash its fury. Ethan was miles away, attending a support group meeting for trauma survivors held in the basement of the local church. The room was dimly lit, the walls adorned with faded posters promoting mental health awareness. As rain pounded against the small basement windows, Ethan sat in a circle of chairs, sharing his story with others who understood the weight of loss. "I didn't ask for any of this," he admitted, his voice breaking. "All I wanted was to find a place where I could heal. Instead, I've become the villain in someone else's story." The group listened silently, their faces etched with empathy. When Ethan finished speaking, one woman reached out and squeezed his hand. "You deserve better," she said softly. "Don't let them win." Her words lingered in his mind as he drove home later that night, the storm still raging overhead. Lightning illuminated the road in brief, blinding flashes, while rain hammered relentlessly against his windshield. He felt a strange sense of unease, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Something about the evening felt off, like the calm before a storm wasn't over yet. Back at Karen's house, chaos erupted. Tyler Miller stood in the shadows of his mother's backyard, soaked to the bone but undeterred by the downpour. In his hands, he clutched a gasoline canister and a box of matches. His plan had evolved over the past few weeks, fueled by anger and frustration. At first, the pranks were meant to scare Karen, to make her realize the damage her actions caused. But now, Tyler wanted more. He wanted her to feel the same fear she'd inflicted on others. He wanted her to understand what it meant to lose control. He moved quickly, dousing the perimeter of the house with gasoline. The liquid pooled in dark streaks along the foundation, glistening eerily in the intermittent flashes of lightning. Tyler hesitated for a moment, staring at the matchbox in his trembling hand. Was he really going to do this? What if things got out of hand? But then he thought about Ethan, about how his mother had turned an entire neighborhood against him, accusing him of crimes he hadn't committed, about how she'd reduced a grieving man to a target, all because of some stupid candles. Rage surged through Tyler, drowning out his doubts. With a flick of his wrist, he struck the match and tossed it onto the gasoline-soaked ground. The flames roared to life instantly, spreading faster than Tyler anticipated. Within seconds, they engulfed the side of the house, climbing upward like hungry beasts. Panic gripped him as he realized the fire was already out of control. He stumbled backward, dropping the gas canister and sprinting toward the street. By the time he reached the sidewalk, smoke was billowing from the windows and the unmistakable crackle of burning wood filled the air. Inside the house, Karen lay asleep in her bed, oblivious to the inferno consuming her home. She'd taken a sleeping pill earlier, hoping to quiet the anxiety that had plagued her for weeks. Now, as the heat intensified and the smell of smoke seeped into her bedroom, she stirred groggily, disoriented by the cacophony outside. It took several moments for her to register the danger, by which time flames were licking at her doorframe. Panic set in as she scrambled out of bed, coughing violently as thick black smoke filled the room. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but fear paralyzed her. Where was her phone? Had she left it downstairs? What about the neighbors? Were they safe? She staggered toward the window, clawing at the latch with trembling fingers. The glass shattered under her weight as she threw herself onto the front lawn, collapsing in a heap amidst the pouring rain. Behind her, the house burned brightly, casting an orange glow across the neighborhood. Within minutes, the street was alive with activity. Neighbors poured out of their homes, shouting and pointing at the blaze. Someone called 911, while others grabbed garden hoses in a futile attempt to contain the flames. Fire trucks arrived shortly after, their sirens wailing above the din of the storm. Firefighters raced to extinguish the fire, but it was clear the house was beyond saving. By the time the flames were finally subdued, Karen's home was little more than a charred shell. Karen sat huddled under a blanket on the curb, shivering despite the warmth radiating from the wreckage. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, her once immaculate appearance reduced to ruin. For the first time in years, she looked vulnerable, human. Across town, Ethan pulled into his driveway, unaware of the disaster unfolding nearby. He stepped out of his car, shielding himself from the rain with his jacket, when he noticed flashing lights in the distance. Curious, he walked toward the commotion, joining a growing crowd of onlookers gathered at the edge of Karen's property. "What happened?" he asked a neighbor, his voice barely audible over the noise. "It's Karen's house," the man replied grimly. "It went up in flames. No one knows how it started." Ethan froze, his stomach churning with dread. He scanned the scene, searching for Karen among the scattered figures. When he finally spotted her, wrapped in a blanket and staring blankly at the remains of her home, guilt washed over him. Despite everything she'd done, seeing her like this, broken and defeated, was unbearable. The next morning, rumors spread like wildfire, pun intended. Everyone had a theory about who or what had caused the blaze. Some pointed fingers at Ethan, citing his ongoing feud with Karen as evidence of his guilt. Others whispered about supernatural forces, blaming the fire on bad karma or divine retribution. A few even speculated that Karen herself might have accidentally started it, a careless cigarette or faulty wiring gone wrong. The police launched an investigation, combing through the wreckage for clues. They confiscated security footage from nearby homes, interviewed witnesses, and collected physical evidence, including the discarded gasoline canister found near the backyard. Fingerprints lifted from the canister matched neither Ethan nor Karen, leaving authorities baffled. Meanwhile, Karen retreated into isolation, too ashamed to face her neighbors. The fire had destroyed not only her home but also her carefully constructed facade. She realized now how much damage her actions had caused, not just to Ethan but to everyone around her. Her obsession with control had blinded her to the consequences of her behavior, and now she was paying the price. For Ethan, the aftermath was equally fraught with tension. Though there was no concrete evidence linking him to the fire, suspicion lingered in the air like smoke. Whispers followed him wherever he went, accusations lurking beneath polite smiles. Even Mrs. Peterson stopped bringing him cookies, her loyalty wavering in the face of mounting pressure. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his living room, he received a knock at the door. Expecting another angry neighbor or perhaps even the police, he opened it cautiously. To his surprise, it was Karen. Her hair was damp from the rain, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her losses. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to let her in. Finally, he nodded and stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, clutching her coat tightly around her shoulders. Neither of them spoke for several moments, the silence heavy with unspoken words. "I'm sorry," Karen blurted out suddenly, tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong about you, about everything. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but all I did was tear it apart. And now," she gestured helplessly toward the window, where faint wisps of smoke still rose from her ruined home. "Now I've lost everything." Ethan studied her carefully, weighing her sincerity against his lingering resentment. Finally, he sighed and gestured for her to sit. "You don't owe me anything," he said simply. "But if you're looking for forgiveness, start by forgiving yourself." The days following the fire were a blur of activity. Emergency responders combing through the wreckage, insurance adjusters assessing damages, and neighbors exchanging hushed whispers about what had happened. The neighborhood that once rallied behind Karen Miller now seemed unsure how to react. Some pitied her, while others whispered accusations under their breath. Suspicion still hung heavily in the air, and Ethan remained at its center. For Karen, the loss of her home was devastating, but it paled in comparison to the emotional toll. She'd spent years cultivating an image of control and authority, only to see it crumble in the face of chaos. Her perfect life, meticulously curated down to the last detail, had been reduced to ash. And yet, as painful as it was, the destruction forced her to confront truths she'd long ignored, not just about herself, but about the people around her. Karen's first attempt at self-reflection came during a sleepless night in a motel room paid for by her estranged husband. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by boxes of salvaged belongings, she sifted through old photos and mementos. One picture caught her eye, a family portrait taken years ago before things fell apart. In it, Karen smiled brightly, flanked by her teenage son Tyler and ex-husband. They looked happy, or at least they pretended to be. As she stared at Tyler's face, Guilt gnawed at her. When was the last time she truly connected with him? Months? Years? She couldn't remember. Their relationship had devolved into arguments and slammed doors, culminating in his decision to move out shortly after turning 16. He'd accused her of being too controlling, too judgmental, a charge she dismissed at the time as teenage rebellion. Now, she wondered if he'd been right all along. Her thoughts turned to Ethan. Despite everything she'd done to him, the harassment, the accusations, the public shaming, he hadn't retaliated. Instead, he'd offered her forgiveness when she least deserved it. That moment in his living room, sitting awkwardly amidst flickering candlelight, had shaken her to her core. For the first time, Karen saw herself through someone else's eyes, and she didn't like what she saw. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own emotions. The fire had left him conflicted. On one hand, he felt vindicated. The neighborhood's hostility toward him had shifted slightly, with some neighbors beginning to question whether Karen's campaign had gone too far. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. Fire had destroyed his family, and now it had destroyed Karen's home. Was this some twisted form of karma, or was there something darker at play? His suspicions deepened when investigators revealed traces of gasoline at the scene. Arson wasn't uncommon in cases like this, but something about the sit-up felt deliberate, a message rather than random destruction. Who would go to such lengths to frame him, and why? Ethan decided to investigate quietly, retracing the events leading up to the fire. He revisited Mrs. Peterson's warnings, recalling her cryptic words, "Some fires can't be put out once they start." At the time, he'd assumed she meant the escalating tension between him and Karen. Now, he wondered if she knew more than she let on. One afternoon, he knocked on Mrs. Peterson's door, hoping to glean some insight. She greeted him cautiously, inviting him inside despite her obvious unease. "I need to know," Ethan began, cutting straight to the point. "Did you hear anything unusual before the fire? Anything at all?" Mrs. Peterson hesitated, wringing her hands nervously. "I shouldn't say anything," she murmured, "but I did see someone near Karen's house that night. A young man, tall, broad-shouldered. He looked familiar." Ethan frowned. "Do you think it could have been me?" She shook her head emphatically. No, it wasn't you." But she trailed off, biting her lip. Finally, she sighed. "It might have been Karen's son, Tyler." The revelation hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Tyler Miller, Karen's estranged teenage son. He'd seen the boy around the neighborhood occasionally, always distant, always brooding. Could he really be responsible for the fire? If so, why? Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan tracked down Tyler's address. It wasn't hard. The teenager lived with his father in a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. When Ethan arrived, Tyler answered the door warily, his expression shifting from surprise to defiance. "What do you want?" Tyler snapped, crossing his arms defensively. "I'm not here to accuse you of anything," Ethan said calmly, "but I think we need to talk." After a tense pause, Tyler stepped aside, allowing Ethan to enter. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, with posters of rock bands plastered across the walls. Tyler slumped onto the couch, avoiding eye contact. "You know about the fire, don't you?" Ethan asked gently. Tyler stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, so what? Did you start it?" For a moment, Tyler said nothing. Then, with a bitter laugh, he nodded. "Yeah, I did." Ethan exhaled sharply, sinking into a chair opposite him. "Why?" Tyler shrugged, though his voice betrayed the anger simmering beneath the surface. "She deserved it. All those rules, all that judgment. She ruined your life, Ethan. Did you know that? She made everyone hate you because of some stupid candles. And for what? To feel important." Ethan leaned forward, his tone firm but compassionate. "I get it. You wanted to protect me, to stand up for what's right. But this isn't the way, Tyler. Hurting people doesn't fix anything. Trust me, I've been there." Tyler's defenses cracked slightly, his shoulders sagging. "I didn't mean for it to get so bad. I just wanted to scare her, make her realize how messed up she was being." "And now?" Ethan pressed. Tyler hesitated, tears welling up in his eyes. "Now I don't know. What happens next?" Ethan encouraged Tyler to come clean, to confess to Karen and take responsibility for his actions. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to begin healing. Together, they devised a plan. Ethan accompanied Tyler to the motel where Karen was staying, offering moral support as the teenager prepared to face his mother. When they arrived, Karen greeted them with visible apprehension. Seeing Tyler standing beside Ethan filled her with dread. Had they teamed up against her? Was this another attack? "Mom," Tyler began, his voice trembling. "I need to tell you something." Karen listened silently as Tyler confessed to starting the fire. His words poured out in a torrent of guilt and regret, each sentence punctuated by tears. By the time he finished, Karen was crying too, not out of anger, but sorrow. "I'm sorry," Tyler whispered, collapsing into a chair. "I never meant for it to go this far." Karen reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry too," she admitted softly, "for everything." In the weeks that followed, Karen underwent a profound transformation. She began volunteering with organizations supporting families affected by fires, channeling her pain into purpose. Her once divisive social media presence shifted to promoting kindness and understanding, encouraging others to learn from her mistakes. Ethan found renewed purpose as well, leading workshops for trauma survivors and advocating for mental health awareness. His openness inspired others to share their struggles, creating a supportive network in the community. The final step toward reconciliation came when Karen invited Ethan to help rebuild her home. Together with Tyler and several neighbors who finally warmed up to him, they worked side by side, hammering nails and painting walls. It was slow, grueling work, but it symbolized something greater: unity, forgiveness, and hope. On the day the house was completed, Karen hosted a small gathering to thank everyone involved. As the sun set over the newly restored property, she raised a glass in a toast. "To second chances," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, "and to finding light in the ashes." Ethan smiled faintly, raising his own glass. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in brighter days ahead. The months that followed the fire were transformative, not just for Karen and her family, but for the entire neighborhood. What had once been a community fractured by suspicion and hostility became a tapestry of healing and renewal. The rebuilding process wasn't just about constructing walls and roofs. It was about mending relationships, forgiving past wrongs, and finding strength in vulnerability. Karen's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Gone was the self-righteous crusader who policed every detail of her neighbors' lives. In her place stood a humbled woman determined to use her second chance wisely. She threw herself into volunteer work, partnering with organizations that supported families affected by fires. Whether it was organizing fundraisers, distributing supplies, or simply offering a listening ear, Karen poured her energy into helping others heal. Her social media presence underwent a similar evolution. Once a platform for judgment and control, her posts now radiated empathy and understanding. She shared stories of resilience, encouraged open conversations about mental health, and even highlighted Ethan's advocacy efforts. Her followers responded positively, many expressing gratitude for her newfound authenticity. But perhaps the most significant change occurred within her relationship with Tyler. For years, their interactions had been marked by tension and resentment. Now, as they worked side by side to rebuild their home, they discovered common ground. Conversations that once ended in arguments became opportunities for connection. Slowly but surely, the cracks in their bond began to mend. One evening, as they sat together on the newly built porch watching the sunset, Karen turned to Tyler with tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly. "Not just for owning up to what happened, but for having the courage to change." Tyler smiled faintly, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. Do you think I'll ever stop feeling guilty? Karen shook her head. Probably not. But guilt isn't always a bad thing. It reminds us of our humanity. Just don't let it define you. You've got a lot of good ahead of you. For Ethan, the aftermath of the fire brought unexpected clarity. Though he'd initially struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering why his family had been taken while others survived, he found solace in purpose. Leading workshops for trauma survivors allowed him to channel his pain into something meaningful. Each session became a lifeline, connecting him with others who understood the weight of loss and the struggle to move forward. His growing friendship with Karen and Tyler added another layer of healing. Though their relationship remained complicated, it was also deeply rewarding. Together, they formed an unlikely trio bound by shared experiences and mutual respect. On weekends, they'd often gathered at Karen's rebuilt home, sharing meals and laughter under the same roof that had once been consumed by flames. Ethan's candlelit rituals continued, but they took on new significance. No longer symbols of grief alone, the flickering flames now represented hope and renewal. He invited others to join him, encouraging them to find their own sources of light in times of darkness. It was a simple gesture, but one that resonated deeply with those who participated. The neighborhood itself underwent a subtle yet profound shift. The fire served as a wake-up call, prompting residents to reevaluate their priorities. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves began reaching out, forming bonds over coffee or weekend barbecues. Even those who had sided with Karen during her campaign against Ethan extended olive branches, acknowledging his strength and grace under pressure. Mrs. Peterson played a pivotal role in fostering this sense of community. Having witnessed the chaos unfold firsthand, she became a bridge between factions, encouraging dialogue and understanding. Her weekly potluck dinners became a staple, drawing crowds eager to reconnect and rebuild trust. "It's amazing what a little disaster can do," she joked one evening, raising her glass in a toast. "Who knew we'd all end up closer because of it?" Laughter rippled through the room, a testament to how far they'd come. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a true community, one where differences were celebrated rather than feared.